Hey everyone, so my name is Adam Kinder. I'm one of the co-founders of Gather and Found and also a co-creator at the Leaders and Founders Group. So today for the Leaders and Founders podcast, we're really excited to have Sean Hunter on the show. So Sean, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Adam.
Good stuff. No, so just to give everyone a bit of a background. So you're CIO, obviously at OakNorth. You do some startup advisory work, and obviously have a rich background in leadership and FinTech, of course. So I'm never really great with intros. To be fair, it always is a bit better for you guys. So just for the listeners and everyone sort of tuning in, if you could just give us a bit of a background on yourself, that'd be great.
Sure. Hi, I'm Sean Hunter. So I'm the CIO of OakNorth. I've been involved in, computer science and software engineering for a very long time now, but it wasn't always that way. I actually did a degree in postgrad in music because I thought I was going to be a professional musician, and then my career as a programmer sort of took off, and my career in music kind of didn't. I had tendon problems, so I couldn't play anymore. But basically, the reason I was into programming is my father was an engineer, and me and my brother used to program computers for him. He used to give us pocket money to write little computer programs for him ever since we were very small. And then, during the dot-com era, I led a team through a couple of IPOs. And then I was at Goldman for a while as what they call a strategist, which is a quant developer.
Mm-hmm.
And then I joined Palantir Technologies, which was my first real kind of proper tech company, I guess. And then at Palantir, I led their work in Europe with big financial firms, especially on detecting rogue traders.
Okay.
And then after that, I was the co-head of their joint venture that they made with Credit Suisse called Signac, which was my first kind of company that I co-founded, I guess. And then after that, I joined OakNorth. And OakNorth, I was the first employee after the founders in the platform business when they first started to talk to customers about licensing the platform.
Wow, fantastic. Yeah, I'm always really interested. You mentioned obviously kind of taking it back to wanting to be within professional music, and I guess taking a look back on your career, as is the same for a lot of people, you often end up in a completely sort of different place to where you'd expect it to be. So to kind of take it back recently, right? So there's loads of crazy things have been happening. Obviously, in the last few weeks, I think where we're at now, a lot of people didn't expect we'd be here. If you look back. Kind of Feb, March time, people probably would have laughed, I suppose. Just to give us kind of a quick picture before we get into the journey and really kind of the core stuff around what you guys are doing. What does the picture currently look like for you guys and OakNorth? I mean, you still seem to be really busy. So where are you kind of at with things, and how has it affected you?
Yeah, so we are very busy. So firstly, for people who don't know, OakNorth is a bank in the UK, and outside the UK, we're a fintech that works with banks. And the crisis has affected both halves of that business in different ways. So in the UK, obviously, our bank is working with borrowers to help them through the crisis. And we're doing that in a couple of different ways. Firstly, we're part of the government's CBILS program, which is a coronavirus-specific government loan program. So we were granted a small allocation compared to some other banks, but an allocation to lend to small business owners. We're a bank that focuses particularly on SMEs, so we want to solve the problem of SME lending globally. That's our goal. So so we've been doing these CBILS loans to try and help small business owners through the crisis, but also for our existing borrowers, we're also working with them, and then taking new business just as a bank going to lend, because there's still good businesses out there that still need debt finance to grow. And one of the things that we're able to do is using tech and advanced analytics, we can actually do a lot of analysis that normal banks can't do to figure out which businesses we think have the best chance of firstly weathering the storm, and then secondly rebooting afterwards.
Sure. And with regards to that process, because I think that's something that a lot of business leaders, are going to be sort of looking at, right? their lifespan, I guess,
Mhm.
kind of thrive or survive. And it's obviously something which is very obviously close to how you work in your model. I guess just to kind of explain how that process works, is it pretty ruthless in the sense that it's a case of, you obviously want to help everyone, but can't help everyone at the same time. Are there key things that you look for? Or is it really the foundational sort of core aspects of that business which are most important to you?
Yeah. So as a bank, we focus very much on a certain kind of business, and we focus on a niche, which are businesses that are underserved and overlooked by regular banks.
Mhm.
So a lot of businesses, they're in this position where they're too big for a kind of funding circle, IWACA automated type loan, but
Mhm.
they're too small for the really large corporate desks to even talk to them.
Sure.
Um, and so that's our kind of our niche we try and serve particularly well.
Yeah.
So we focus on that in particular. And from a bank perspective, we're always looking for good businesses. So we look for profitable businesses that have got a proven business model and need debt to scale. Um, so we think that if you're still burning cash, you're probably more in a position for an equity investor rather than a debt finance provider.
Mhm.
Um, and you're probably going to look for a regular investor. So that's not what we do. Um, and then outside the UK, as a fintech, we work with banks who want to be better at serving this blind spot that banks have. So this missing middle of businesses that are too big for an automated decision, too small for the kind of full manual, old school corporate lending decision.
Yeah, perfect. And yeah, I think the story of OakNorth. I mean, coming out of the UK, it's been one of the biggest success stories, I guess, that the UK has developed and has come out. Um, just to kind of take us back to the reason why you got involved, I think it's a super interesting business where a lot of people are really kind of intrigued by what you're doing. Obviously, the success of the business and thus essentially your service has been pretty unprecedented in itself. Anyway, obviously you had the big investment from SoftBank quite recently as
Mhm.
well. So it's been a hugely talked about business. What was it that really sort of got your interest, I guess, coming from your background, where you've been? Yeah, what did that look like to you, and what was the reason?
Yeah, so I mean, the reason I've always through my career looked for opportunities that I think are ways in which I can learn or things that I think are interesting. Um, and so this was definitely that. When I first met Rishi Khosla and Joel Pellman, the two founders, I really felt they were people I could learn a lot from,
Mhm.
and the business was really really interesting, and it was a chance to do something really exciting and different. And obviously, like I believe that small businesses are the lifeblood of the economy, and that's true globally. They provide most of the employment, they provide most of the economic growth, most of the innovation and dynamism, etc. And Britain is fantastic at launching small company. So
Mhm.
I really thought that was an exciting opportunity to do something really really interesting.
Yeah, perfect. And I suppose if you were to look back, take it to when you were with Palantir, completely
Mhm.
sort of different type of work in terms of your involvement, and I guess the client work that you were doing as well. Would you have said that you'd probably be CIO at OpenNorth back then?
No, definitely not. I mean, yeah. So, I mean, one of the things is my career has always been a set of sort of somewhat strange moves,
Sure.
like, um, going from a .com to Goldman was
Hmm.
definitely not something that normally what people were doing. But at the time, Goldman was doing something really innovative around, well, what you would now call cloud computing. So they
Hmm.
developed a distributed risk and pricing infrastructure, which they asked me to kind of help them develop, and it sounded really interesting intellectually. And then when that kind of ceased to be that exciting, you know, I got an offer to work at Palantir, and when the more I looked at the people there and the work they were doing, the more interesting it seemed. And so it was kind of it was definitely an unconventional move, but it seemed to be really exciting and interesting. And I think OakNorth is a similar type of thing where it's definitely not the move that someone would have, from Silicon Valley would have guessed that I might have done. But I definitely, I'm very pleased that I did it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, yeah, it seems like you're doing some fantastic stuff, and I'm sure there's a lot of other really exciting things that you've got in the background. So I think one of the things that a lot of people are really keen to kind of get from us, and one thing we're really keen to probe on with the leaders we speak to, you know. As we said 3-4 months ago, whilst this was in the background and everyone was sort of starting to talk about it, nobody knew the impact that it would have.
Mm.
We've seen the entire workforce globally, pretty much go work from home. Obviously, within software and tech, it's a little bit easier to do that, I guess, and a lot of
Mhm.
people are doing that anyway. But when the sort of official, kind of lockdown rules came into place, and everyone knew that this is what was going to be happening, what did that look like from inside OakNorth, and how did you, I guess, manage that process from a leadership perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, it's fair to say that a lot of people in our leadership were not big fans of working from home. We have a very team-based collaborative culture,
Sure.
and our founders and some of the other people felt that that would suffer from the remote working, and that people might become isolated and sort of stuck in their little silo rather than working collaboratively, which we think is very important for us to deliver the kind of service we do to clients.
Sure.
When the crisis hit and everyone went into lockdown, firstly, we did a full test, sort of 2 weeks before the actual lockdown was enforced. We actually sent the whole company home for a day just to check that everything would work if it came to that.
Sure.
So we were actually really well prepared from that perspective. And then the other side of it was, um, as the lockdown process has sort of evolved, um, we've kept a really close eye. So the first thing is we've kept a close eye on people's productivity metrics and so on to check, is this hurting people's productivity? Are there things we can do to help them to be more effective, etc.
Sure.
And then the second thing is, we put in place a lot of programs to try and help with people's well-being, try and emphasize the social side. So, we have things like a, online meditation session if people want to join in with that. We have a, sort of fun socializing channels on our chat system so that, if people just want to hang out. We also, for the first week or so, for people who are not that used to remote working, we
Mhm.
actually put up some Zoom channels that people could just go on mute, just be on Zoom with all their colleagues,
Yeah.
just so that they kind of saw people. Because a lot of people, were feeling like they were really, it's not so, everyone's getting used to it now, but at the time people were feeling kind of lonely, and so it just helped to have people around.
Yeah, definitely. And
So,
I think, yeah, it's a really good point that you raised. And I think one of the key things that, I'm sure the government are thinking about, and a lot of companies, especially, businesses with a big sort of pool of employees. But, everyone has a different environment. I mean, for myself, I've got 2 young children, so those meditation classes sound really good. I think other people, who maybe live by themselves as well, equally, there are challenges there that, may not be a challenge to somebody else, but there's a lot of stuff to think about. And how have you adapted? I mean, have you found productivity is good? People are working effectively?
yeah, actually, and a lot of our productivity metrics, productivity is actually up in certain respects.
Mm.
I think that's, on the platform side where I mostly work, um, that's definitely the case for our software engineers and so on. And so we're actually, thinking about what lessons to take away from that in future when we go back to normal life again. I think, one of the things we've found is that there are a lot of things you can do to help people, and the benefit of people being in lockdown is they can concentrate more. It does somewhat harm collaborative
Yeah.
work, so it definitely, people, you want to make sure that people aren't suffering in silence if they don't understand something or whatever.
Sure.
But as long as you're taking the right measures, so far it's been fine for us. I
Mhm.
think from our clients' perspective, we've actually found that we can see more clients, which
Yeah.
just from a practical point of view, because you're not having to travel, you can actually fit in more meetings and so on.
Yeah.
So I find myself, in meetings all hours of the day
Mhm.
because we have clients all around the world. And it means that rather than being on a plane for 12 hours, seeing maybe 2 clients, and then being on a plane for 12 hours back, being complete zombie the next day, I can actually function adequately, and I can see, 5, 6 clients in a day easily.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm keen to get into some of the kind of core stuff and how you're helping those clients now as well. But I suppose just looking ahead, I think, I suppose in terms of how we work, my business partner and I, absolutely love my children. But I think I'd be lying if I said that my days hadn't been a little bit broken,
Mm.
compared to obviously, usual. So I think a lot of companies are probably going to adapt how they do work. At the same time, I think, yeah, you can't sort of discount the value of the face-to-face relationship building
Mm.
and,
Yeah,
the chats over grabbing a quick coffee, something as small as that.
yeah.
That's where, yeah, a lot of friendships are formed, a lot of good ideas are born as well. But do you think you're yourself in the position that you're in, as you mentioned with the client work as well, you are actually more available now, probably a little more productive, more free to maybe speak to these clients and vice versa? Do you think that will change how you operate as well?
I think it. I think it will. I mean, I think the one thing is that as a bank, there are definitely trade-offs, and as a fintech, there are definitely trade-offs. So, as you said, we think that the face-to-face, in-person interaction is incredibly important for clients, for example, and it also, I think, from a software point of view, on the platform side, you get a different sort of collaboration when you're in person. So,
Mm,
if I'm with a bunch of engineers and we're around a whiteboard, um, just talking, you can get a kind of different kind of quality of interaction,
yeah,
coming up with ideas and so on. You can go a lot faster. Whereas, um, you know, online and so on, there's a lot of tools, remote works great, but it's actually, it does suffer a little bit. And as you say, the sort of serendipity of, you're going to get a coffee and you just overhear someone talking and you happen to know how to solve their problem or whatever,
yeah.
it shouldn't be overlooked. I mean, I think as a company, we probably are gonna. I mean, how could you not
Mm.
change what you're doing on the basis of having gone through this experience, right? You're going to learn things, do things differently.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and I think it's probably about finding a balance, right?
Mm.
Yeah, just taking it on a case by case basis. Yeah, not going sort of one way too far to the left or the right, I suppose, in
Yeah,
terms of how
yeah.
you work. But yeah, just being reasonable, I guess. So to bring kind of back into your clients, so what are you doing, as a business now to support your clients, with their risk, the portfolio that you work with? How does that look like? And I'm sure you probably had a few concerned emails and calls when the news was starting to break. So what does that look like currently?
Yeah. So, I mean, well, one thing that helps us a lot is, we're a profitable business and we were profitable before this crisis as well. And I think as a as a business, if you're generating cash, you always have better options than, I think people who were going into this crisis, thinking, oh, I'm burning cash, but at some point we're going to hit the J curve and we're going to kind of, be fine as long as we make it to our next funding, which is perfectly normal for an early stage tech business, for example. I
Mm,
think those businesses have a lot more anxiety right now because, you know, obviously it's going to be harder to get funding. It's going to be harder to achieve their exit and so on.
mhm,
So that's the one thing, which is just purely practical. I think from our point of view, we're doing a few concrete things. So in the UK, as I said, we're doing the CBOS program. We're also working with our existing borrowers to make sure, we're analyzing our whole portfolio to look for borrowers who may be vulnerable, and then reaching out to those people proactively to see how we can help them find out what their plans are, how they're being affected, etc. That's one set of things. Outside the UK, as a fintech, um, this crisis has caused a rapid acceleration because lots of banks around the world, and obviously our clients as a fintech are banks, lots of banks have been, accelerating programs because they have to. And so they, for example, need to do more credit analysis. They need to do better monitoring of their loans to
mhm,
understand their business in this crisis. And so programs that they were kind of planning to take 2-3 years are suddenly getting done in months, etc., because they're finding they have to go faster because they need to have greater visibility and transparency. And that actually in some respects is an opportunity for us, because they're suddenly saying, oh yeah, this monitoring thing you've been talking to us about actually would be really useful to understand our borrowers. So that's one thing. The second thing is, there are these government programs. So for example, in the US, there's the Main Street Lending Program and the PPP, which is the Paycheck Protection Program, which are programs that the US government is putting in place to support small businesses. And we've been helping our clients with those programs. And so that's been a very, very intense period of activity to firstly create a solution, which was sort of adapting our existing platform to do these new kinds of things as well. And then, talking to a bunch of banks about it and getting it implemented in a very, very short space of time.
Yeah, of course. And I think one thing that we have seen, you mentioned around the acceleration of, implementation, development of certain products and platforms. I think we've seen, in the last 6 weeks, it's almost, you have to get stuff built, right? If there's something which has maybe been sort of in the background, but is actually a core product, which is actually going to be pretty central to your offering and survival, I suppose. Yeah, it's been really interesting to see companies actually develop some great software and put some great things out quicker than they ever would have done before. Maybe not always the case for some businesses, I'm sure, but no, it's been really interesting to see the reaction, I guess, from the market. And as you said, there have been, some great schemes which are available. I think that, the governments have been doing, some good work to really try and help preserve a lot of these businesses and the small sort of high street brands and everything as well with it. And I suppose from your own perspective, as you said, pretty unique in that you are a profitable, unicorn business, which you don't often kind of find with some of them who come through. So, I mean, from your own perspective, in terms of, you obviously lend directly from your own balance sheets, from the bank. What have you done to help sort of protect your core sort of personal loan book as well, which go out to these businesses?
So the one thing is we have a very proactive monitoring system. So we constantly, look forward based on various indicators using, various external data and so on, to try and develop forecasts and see how our borrowers are doing. And then that gives us an insight into, which ones might potentially have problems. So we were doing that already. What we've sort of doubled down on is how do you take that analysis and apply it specifically to COVID? And what's interesting about that is different businesses respond in different ways. So, take an example of a chain of bars, right? So the bars might be completely shut down, right? However, in the same sector, if you've got an actual distillery business, like a spirits producer, they're actually doing well out of this crisis. Now, they've needed to retool and sell direct, but their sales are actually up. And then, different sectors are completely different. So, in some sectors are able to respond, some sectors are not able to respond. So, we don't, as a bank, lend to oil and gas, but some of our FinTech clients do.
Sure.
If you take oil and gas, if you've got an oil production company, they actually can't shut their production down. Because if you shut an oil well down, it actually shuts in and you can't get any more oil out of it. So ever. So you actually, even though the oil price has gone right down, these companies are forced to carry on. They're still carrying a lot of cost. So the problems for certain sectors are going to persist long after the immediate lockdown has kind of ceased. And so what we do is we use data to analyze these situations and try and figure out how the crisis is particularly affecting certain sectors. And we have a very granular sort of model of all the different business sectors. And then given a particular sector and a particular business, then we'll go to the borrower and say, okay, what actions are you taking in response to this crisis? So, have you furloughed your staff? Have you cut costs? Are you, what exactly are they doing? And those things will really, really vary by business. So if you take Leon, for example, which was a restaurant chain selling healthy fast food, they've had a very creative and positive response to the crisis where they basically retooled as a sort of supermarket chain almost to deliver what would have been their actual product that they used to cook with, but deliver it as groceries to people. So businesses that are a little bit creative, obviously we support them to try and to try and do their thing and make their business continue to be successful.
Sure, and I think, yeah, as you've said, it's been great to see some of the creativity which has come out, specifically, I guess, of London, but globally
Mm,
as well. A friend of mine actually has a restaurant. He's done a similar thing. It's sort of like home DIY kits.
right.
They are pretty big fat brioche burgers, so you can't have them all the time. But
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
great to see, and they've had, it's probably developed a new revenue stream for them that they didn't really see before, but has actually had great effect and has landed really, really well. And yeah, I think looking forwards, right? People predicting obviously this is going to be bad. We're not 100% sure how bad it may be. There's potential talk of the lockdown restrictions being lifted slightly, but that's obviously a whole other challenge to manage correctly to make sure we don't double dip and it's even worse than this one. But for the sector within fintech, which is a very innovative industry and an area in itself, what sort of products or types of business do you see maybe not profiting through the virus, but doing well but yeah, I guess being born from this sort of tragedy and what we've seen.
Yeah, so I mean, I do think there are going to be unique business models and so on that come out of this. I mean, we've already seen, to take a trivial example, we've already seen Zoom, which was obviously well known in the kind of fintech and sort of tech world, is now a household name. Everyone knows Zoom, like, so certain businesses are suddenly massively in demand, and I think that's gonna continue. And then during an eventual rebound, I expect some of the business models that emerge are going to be a response to things that people have learned during this crisis. So we talked earlier on about things we found that we weren't expecting to happen during remote working and so on, and how that's likely to change our kind of thinking. I would think that there will be business models that come out of that. And as you said, like your friend with the brioche burgers, there are a lot of businesses that have necessity as the mother of invention, as they say. So like they've been forced to innovate in response to the crisis. And I think post-crisis, some of those business models will kind of harden and sort of turn into a more kind of permanent thing. I also think that for us, the recipe that we're following is kind of a tried and tested recipe, in the sense that, these businesses, we're always looking for profitable businesses who need debt finance to scale, who are overlooked by their banks.
Mhm.
And there are lots of those people. It's a very, very large market, multi-trillion-dollar market around the world. And so, we think we'll carry on doing that. The innovation that we bring is kind of, how can you serve these customers better? How can you analyze and understand them better? How can you use tech and data to make good credit decisions as a bank, and then globally to help banks make good credit decisions? And I think that model, we think, will stand the test of time. But I think, a lot of business models where before the crisis, they were maybe just about sort of disrupting the user interface of an existing thing
Mhm.
without being fundamentally innovative. I think some of those will struggle because, what people have realized is that, you know, all your assumptions can be upended very quickly, and you want something more substantive than just the kind of Uberization of an existing service. So I think you're likely to see, quite a big disruptive shift in business models after the crisis kind of plays out.
Yeah, sure. And do you think there will be more pressure for businesses to prove that they're going to be profitable, to have that core business model rather than, yeah, as you said, just being a disruptor?
Yeah, I think so. So I mean, I think the days of scale at any cost
Hmm.
have kind of passed us by. I mean, it was getting old before the crisis a little bit, and I think the crisis has brought that to a boiling point. The profits give you a few different things. Firstly, they give you a capital buffer, which helps you to withstand shocks like this crisis.
Yeah.
The second thing is they give you a proof point. One of the things that, if you're a small business, you're always measuring, you're always trying to understand how things work and try and refine and improve your business model. Well, if you're not a profitable business, you haven't yet got the recipe right. You know what I mean? And so, because if you take WeWork as an example,
Mm.
which is kind of kicking someone when they're down. but WeWork had a great service in the sense that people who were at WeWork really liked the service, but they hadn't yet figured out how to make a profit from that service, which means it's not proven whether or not it can be done. In other words, provide people with this fabulous kind of working environment, very flexible terms, etc., and still be a profitable business. So I think that proof point is something that's very important because it shows that you understand the market price and you're able to operate with unit economics that kind of allow you to survive.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to become even more important post-crisis.
Yeah, no, I think so. And I think it's going to take a lot of people, it's going to make a lot of people take stock of the business, really focus on what's going to be, the most kind of beneficial thing for them to do. And I think, as you said, a lot of business leaders have come under, I guess, quite a lot of heat, early on when they started to furlough large amounts of their staff.
Yeah.
I heard a quote somewhere, and it was, there's no courage in going down with the ship. You might as well make sure that the ship is there to be sailed on another day, essentially.
Yeah.
And I think right now, for every 2 or 3 companies that are continuing to do well, continuing to, to scale and still perform well, there are 10 or 15 companies that may be struggling or going through challenging times. So what sort of advice would you have for, fintechs, tech businesses that are maybe experiencing tough times? What's important for them to be sort of focusing on right now?
Yeah, it's a few different things. I mean, I think the one thing is, you mentioned the kind of difficult decision around furloughing staff, etc. And one of the things about being an owner is that you wanted that. So you kind of have to remind yourself, this is what I wanted. I wanted to be the person who made the big decisions. Yeah. And now it's really important to make a good decision. So I think it's really easy to be paralyzed by fear and because the consequences of your decision are so huge when you're doing something like furloughing staff or whatever, which is not something that anyone wants to do, let's face it. But you can't let that sort of paralyze you into indecision. You have to do the best you can and make, so don't be frightened into not making decisions, because not making a decision is a decision and it's a bad decision just by definition. So that's the one thing. I think the other thing is, we at OakNorth have put a lot of thought into how can we get our employees to act like owners. And one way that we do it is because obviously if you have ownership, you're very aligned with the success of the business, you're very passionate about it, and you fully want it to succeed. And one way we do it is just really encourage staff to buy equity. And it's somewhat non-traditional. Lots of startups give people equity. But, the people don't really value things that they just get given, right? And I think, or at least you don't feel the same way about things you get given versus things you earn. So if you buy equity in your company, you're really taking an active choice to be an owner. And that shifts the mindset of people and really gets them to behave like owners. So, we're very frugal as a company. For example, we're very, very cautious about costs and so on. And a big part of that is right from top to bottom, everyone really pays attention to cost, partly because they really feel like it's their company and they don't want the money to be wasted.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point actually that you've raised there. It's that the whole kind of thing. A cup of tea tastes better if somebody's. If it's that kind of analogy, and I think. When people have that ownership, they have a vested interest in the success of that business. And did you see that as well? Within your sort of culture as a team.
Very much, very much. And I think that you've sort of touched on a couple of interesting things there, because I think a lot of companies, they sort of have a set of values that they kind of put on a slide or something like that. But I think really creating a culture which is built around the values that you have as a company is incredibly important. One way to do that is to really have everyone feel like they're part of the team, rather than, it's like, everyone's kind of rowing in the same direction, then you can really go fast.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. And I think it really speaks volumes as well when companies actually genuinely build that value. I mean, I've worked alongside and partnered with lots of businesses who talk about value so much that it almost, do you really care about it? If you're just talking about it that much, you need to be proactive and actually doing stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think from what you've said, it sounds like you're doing some great stuff to really support your team through this time. And culture is the most important thing. The hundreds of people and thousands, I guess, that work for you, they are what make OakNorth, I suppose.
Definitely.
So yeah, you need to look after them to make sure that they're still there, and people obviously really value that, I think, as well. So just kind of sort of wrap things up. I mean, we're kind of in that period now where I suppose potential news coming in on Sunday on maybe some limitations and restrictions being lifted. Whether that will happen or not, we don't know. But what do the next sort of few weeks and months look like for OakNorth, and I guess beyond that as well?
Yeah. So I mean, right now, as a fintech, we are just going as fast as we can because we've got customers around the world who are coming on board and accelerating things with the platform. So, and obviously these US programs such as Main Street and PPP are really, really massive programs that our clients need help with. So there's a ton of work to do on those things. I think as a bank, we will continue to grow, but be prudent, just like we always have done. So, OakNorth has never been the most adventurous risk-taking type of lender. We look for really good businesses that need debt finance that are being overlooked by banks, but that doesn't mean we'll kind of lend to anyone. So I don't think we're kind of going to suddenly take on a bunch of additional risk as a bank. But I think we will continue to grow because these businesses are still overlooked by traditional banks. And, there's still lots and lots of good businesses out there. And even post-crisis, when there'll be a slack demand in the economy and a lot of people will be struggling, there's still going to be great businesses out there that, will be looking for opportunities to grow and need debt finance to help them. And we want to be a real partner to those entrepreneurs.
And I suppose that would present a potential, pretty big opportunity for you guys, depending on how other lenders sort of look at companies who are maybe much more risk averse, perhaps. I guess there could be a really good opportunity for you to partner and help scale up with some great firms as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a big opportunity. And obviously, there are a couple of dimensions to it. So, on the surface, clearly, when everyone else is being fearful, that's a good time to be bold, right? And I think if lots of the banks in the UK are pulling back or are very cautious, there will be good businesses who are overlooked and will be needing funds. So that's the one thing. The second thing is, it's a fantastic opportunity to build lasting partnerships that are really valuable. We believe very strongly in the power of partnership with our customers. And I think if you're a partner in these difficult times, that's a relationship that will actually, last over the long term. And both as a fintech and as a bank, we're looking to succeed by making our customers and our partners successful. And so, that means that all the things we do now are an investment that's going to pay off in the very long term. So we think that that's a tremendous opportunity to really help people and therefore, help with the recovery of the economy after this crisis is finished.
Yeah, of course. And I think that there is going to be, definitely an abundance of companies that are going to be looking for support from great partners such as yourself. So, yeah, I'm sure it sounds like you've got a busy year coming up.
Very busy. Well, one of the things about OakNorth is every sort of 3 months or so, I look back, I think to myself, oh my God, I'm so busy. I've never been this busy before. And then I look back and think, oh yeah, I thought that 3 months ago. And I thought it 3 months ago before that and so on. It just gets busier and busier. But that's good. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, much better to be super busy than not, for sure. But yeah, I think obviously, as I said, the journey, what you guys have sort of done and built and achieved so far, it's obviously super impressive. I think whenever you see really great UK tech businesses, being from the UK myself as well, you feel kind of proud of them, I guess, in that it's like, oh, that's a UK business. I feel like everyone is definitely sort of behind you, maybe apart from some of the banks potentially who take some market share from. But yeah, I think obviously best of luck with everything as you go. It sounds like you've obviously got some great sort of measures in place, which is going to support you and your clients as well. But look, thank you very much for joining us. There's some great stuff there that I know everyone's going to be really, really keen to listen to and sort of tap into your brain, which seems like a very busy place right now. And I think we've seen so much collaboration as well. I mean, whenever you're not on a Zoom call with a client internally, or sort of good concocting ideas, are you happy for leaders to sort of reach out maybe and just sort of?
Yeah, absolutely. Be more than happy. I'm always, both on a personal level and us as a company, we're always looking to connect with other fintechs and other leaders and so on. It's very interesting. One of the things that we believe is that entrepreneurs talk to other entrepreneurs, and the more we can plug into that community, the better for us, in the more we can do to help people. But also for me personally, it's obviously a really huge source of inspiration and ideas and innovation and so on.
Yeah, of course, and we've seen so much of that as well. I'm sure some people are keeping the kind of the best hands up their sleeve sometimes, but yeah, we've seen the community, the founder community, really sort of come together through this. So yeah, long may that continue, and hopefully that continues long after everyone sort of goes back to 7 days a week in the office when all this finishes. But look, thank you very much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. It's great to have you. And yeah, for anyone listening that's obviously keen to reach out. Bear in mind, he's pretty busy. However, he's more than happy to sort of take some requests and reach out where he can. But yeah, Sean, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. And yeah, best of luck with OakNorth and your journey.
Thanks very much, Adam. It's been great talking.
Cheers, Sean.